At a Neolithic settlement on the Danish island Funen dating back 5,500 years, archaeologists unearthed 14 Neolithic grinding stones originally thought to be used for processing grains into flour. Surprisingly, analyses of these stones and accompanying plant residues suggest that early northern European farmers did not primarily use these tools for making bread but possibly for preparing non-cereal foods like porridge or gruel. A grinding stone, as the name suggests, is a flat-surfaced tool traditionally used for grinding against another, smaller stone. Archaeologists recently uncovered 14 such stones during the excavation of an early Neolithic funnel beaker culture settlement at Frydenland, on Strandby Mark, southeast of Harby on Funen. Alongside the stones, they discovered over 5,000 charred grains, including naked barley, emmer wheat, and durum wheat. Given the presence of these grains, it's easy to assume that the settlement's inhabitants, 5,500 years ago, used the stones to grind cereals into flour for bread making, a common interpretation of such tools. However, new research challenges this assumption. An international team from Denmark, Germany, and Spain analyzed the grains in the grinding stones, concluding that these tools were not used for grinding cereals. The team examined the stones for microscopic plant remains, such as phytoliths and starch grains, trapped in small surface cavities. Surprisingly, they found no evidence of cereal processing. Instead, the few phytoliths present, along with the identified starch grains, originated from wild plants rather than domesticated cereals. We have not identified the plants the starch grains originate from. We have merely ruled out the most obvious candidates, namely the cereals found at the settlement, which were not ground, as well as various collected species, including hazelnuts, explains archaeobotanist, Ph.D. Welmode out from Mosgaard Museum. Together with senior researcher, Dr. Phil. Niels H. Andersen, also from Mosgaard Museum, she led the study recently published in the scientific journal Vegetation History and Archaeobotany. What the grinding stones were used for remains open to interpretation, aside from the fact that they lack clear wear marks from the pushing motions used for grinding grain. The trough-shaped querns with traces of pushing movements emerged 500 years later. The grinding stones we studied here were struck with pestles made of stone, like crushing in a mortar. We also found such pestles at the site, resembling rounded, thick stone sausages. However, we have not analyzed them for phytoliths or starch, explains Niels H. Andersen. This is the first time a state-of-the-art combination of phytolith and starch analyses has been performed on grinding stones from the first farmers in Northern Europe. The results support a hypothesis that archaeobotanists and archaeologists elsewhere in Northern Europe also have proposed after discovering remains of grains cooked into porridge and gruel. That the first farmers did not live on water and bread but rather on water and gruel, alongside berries, nuts, roots, and meat. And yes, they likely drank water. According to Niels H. Andersen, no definitive traces of beer brewing have been found in Denmark before the Bronze Age. Archaeologists noted that the ancient Danes washed down their meals with plain water, as no clear traces of brewing or making other drinks were found in the settlement. No definitive traces of beer brewing have been found in Denmark before the Bronze Age. The discovery on southern Funen is the most extensive find of grinding stones and grains from the funnel beaker culture in the entire region encompassed. The funnel beaker culture was an early farming culture in northern, central, and eastern Europe during the period circa 400–2800 BCE. It marked the introduction of agriculture and cattle farming to Scandinavia. The name refers to the culture's commonly found clay beakers with funnel-shaped necks. This study only involves one settlement, emphasized Welmode out and Andersen. While it supports other findings from the funnel beaker culture, we cannot rule out the possibility of different results emerging when this method is applied to finds from other excavations. Their cautious approach underscores the need for further research to determine whether these findings are representative of broader dietary practices during that period. The research team concluded that early farmers did not live on water and bread but rather on water and gruel, alongside berries, nuts, roots, and meat. This challenges long-held assumptions about Neolithic diets in Northern Europe and provides new perspectives on the culinary practices of ancient communities. The study was a collaboration between researchers from Mosgard Museum and Aarhus University in Denmark, Kiel University in Germany, and the Spanish National Research Council, IMFCSIC, in Barcelona. The so-called funnel beaker culture represents the first phase of people who practiced agriculture and livestock breeding in southern Scandinavia and northern Germany. The way of life of early farmers has been the subject of research for decades. However, it remains a mystery to this day which plant foods they preferred in addition to the basic food grains and which product was made from cereal grains. The millstones analyzed come from the Oldenburg LA 77 site, a Middle Neolithic settlement. It was located on a dune in the former wetland of the Oldenburg Graben on the southwestern Baltic Sea coast. During the Neolithic there were a number of settlements in this wetland, of which Oldenburg LA 77 is one of the best studied. This village is representative of social change in northern Germany. Previously, people lived in isolated farmsteads, but by the late 4th millennium BCE-CE larger village communities were established. The excavations provided evidence of numerous houses and a well, and thousands of individual finds were made, such as flint artifacts, ceramic shards and grinding stones. Dr. Jingpingen, research associate in SFB 1266 and first author of the study, explains, grinding stones are excellent archives for preserving information about plant-based foods. Even a small fragment can contain many plant microfossils, including starch grains and phytoliths. The plant microfossils recovered from the millstones from Oldenburg LA 77 provide information about the processing of various plant foods. In addition to wheat and barley, these also include fruits of wild grasses and knotweed, acorns and starchy tubers. A few seeds may come from wild legumes. Of this diversity of plant food resources from the 5,000-year-old village of Oldenburg LA 77, wild plants are particularly noteworthy. Wild plants have already been documented through the analysis of charred seeds, fruits and tubers from soil samples from this Neolithic village. This study once again confirms their consumption by directly dealing with the processing of food, explains Professor Wiebke Kurlaes, head of the study in the SFB 1266. People in the past knew how to enrich their diets, adds Dr. Jingpingen. This result is consistent with the analysis of plant remains from another settlement of the funnel beaker culture, the site of Frydenland, ca. 3600 BCE, in modern-day Denmark. In Oldenburg LA 77, the microfossil analyses on the millstones indicate that grains were probably both crushed into coarse fragments and ground into fine flour. Together with recently published biomarker evidence for grain on a so-called baking plate from Oldenburg LA 77, this suggests the possible production of flatbread, while botanical and chemical analysis of burnt food residues on ceramic shards support the cooking of porridge. This result differs from studies at the Frydenland site, where evidence of grain milling is lacking, and the abundance of charred grains from soil samples suggests that the grain was most likely consumed as porridge. It is exciting to see that the first farmers had a similar interest in eating wild plants, but differed in the way they prepared their grain, emphasizes Professor Wiebke Kurlaes. Indeed, existing studies suggest that early farmers in northern Germany and Denmark may have had different preferences for grain-based meals. The food preparation and cooking of the first farmers was complex and diverse, as the traces they left behind show,